Today's Words of Wisdom, Children's Health and Sustainable Planet Jeju International Conference will be presented in Korean and English with subtitles in Arabic, Alexis or Vietnamese, Chinese, Dutch, English, French, German, Hebrew, Hindi, Hungarian, Indonesian, Italian, Japanese, Korean, Mongolian, Persian, Polish, Portuguese, Punjabi, Romanian, Russian, Thai, Turkish, Urdu, and Spanish.
제주도는 대한민국에서 가장 큰 섬으로 아름다운 자연경관을 갖는 축복을 받았습니다. 신선한 공기와 맑은 물, 청정한 바다, 다양한 크기의 화산은 이러한 자연경관에 아름다움을 더해줍니다. 제주의 아름다운 자연환경 중 일부는 유네스코 세계자연유산으로 등재되었습니다. 등재된 유산으로는 한라산 국립공원, 성산 일출봉, 그리고 검은오름 용암 동굴계가 있습니다.
또한 한라산은 그 아름다움과 생물종 다양성으로 2002년부터 유네스코 생물권 보전지역으로 보호되었으며 360개의 기생화산인 오름을 품고 있습니다. 제주도는 천혜의 자연유산뿐 아니라 이를 지키기 위한 노력으로도 유명합니다. 사실상 제주도민들의 가슴은 제주도와 하나가 되어 고동치고 있습니다.
귀중한 자연환경을 보존하여 미래 세대를 위한 유산으로 남기는 것은 제주도민에게 있어 가장 중요한 관심사입니다. 우리는 자연과 함께 살아가면서 우리의 아름다운 환경을 보존하기 위해서 최선을 다할 것입니다. 우리는 선조들의 지혜로운 생활 방식을 따르며 녹색 소비를 실천할 것입니다.
우리의 문화유산과 우리의 공동체적인 삶을 잘 보존해 나갈 겁니다. 우리는 지속가능한 발전을 위해 친환경적이고 생태적 활동을 지원해 나갈 겁니다. 우리는 환경보호와 세계 평화를 위해 적극적으로 참여할 겁니다.
2009년 9월 21일 제주도의 49개 시민단체가 공동으로 아이건강과 지속가능 지구촌 제주 국제 컨퍼런스를 공동 주최하여 사회적으로 가장 중요한 두 가지 주제에 대해서 논의했습니다. 바로 아이들의 건강과 기후변화입니다. 유기농 비건에 초점을 맞춘 이 특별한 행사는 행성의 온도를 낮추고 또한 어린이들의 영양을 개선하는 해결책으로 유기농 비건을 제시했습니다.
이 컨퍼런스에 참석한 정부의 중요한 인사들로는 김태환 제주특별자치도지사, 양성원 제주특별자치도 교육감 등이 있습니다. 그리고 여기 참석한 환경 전문가로는 UN 정부간 기후변화위원회 의장인 라젠드라 파차우리 박사, 그리고 네덜란드 환경평가국의 기후와 지구촌 지속가능성 부서의 주프 오데 로휘스 부장이 있습니다.
또한 의학계를 이끄는 저명한 의사들도 전문 지식을 함께 나누었습니다. 여기엔 미국 휴메인 소사이어티 보건축산 책임자인 마이클 그레거 박사, 권위 있는 내과 의사이자 영양학 전문가인 조엘 펄먼 박사, 책임 있는 의료를 위한 의사회 창립자이자 회장인 닐 보라드 박사, 미국에서 유명한 맥두걸 프로그램의 창립자이자 의학부문 원장인 존 맥두걸 박사, 한국의 저명한 신경외과 전문의인 대구의료원 황성수 박사 등이 포함됩니다.
또한 많은 언론사들이 이 행사를 취재했습니다. MBC, KBS, CBS, 아리랑 라디오 등의 방송사와 한국일보, 한겨레신문, 연합뉴스, 제주일보 등의 신문들과 미디어 제주, 제주소리 등의 인터넷 뉴스 미디어에서도 이 행사를 보도했습니다. 이 행사의 귀빈으로 화상회의를 통한 참석을 초청받으신 칭하이 무상사께서는 너그럽게 초대를 수락하셨습니다.
이제 칭하이 무상사와의 화상회의 8부작 중 제2부 재방송에 여러분을 초대합니다. 화상회의 제목은 아이건강과 지속가능 지구촌 제주 국제 컨퍼런스로 2009년 9월 21일 대한민국 제주도에서 개최되었습니다.
Many people have visited South Korea to encourage global actions on climate change, including many children. We have collected voices from children who very recently came to Korea for climate change activities. Let's hear from them.
Now it is the time to act. If not here, then where? If not now, then when? If not us, then who?
For many people, climate change, they think like it's melting of glaciers. What we can do to stop that, it will melt. But it's not that. We individually can really do a lot of things.
I'll try to take each and every possible action from my side.
Please start now.
Sea levels could rise. People in the coastal areas, especially in Africa and South America, could lose their homes.
I became a vegetarian when many of my friends were vegetarian, and I asked them why, and they told me that it was because of the environment.
If we don't save it now, our future generations will have no place to live.
There are no political and geographical boundaries for environmental problems. Blaming any nation for any problem is of no use until we can have any possible action.
We children expect you politicians to come up with sustainable solutions to the ongoing climate change and global warming.
Be vegetarians and save the environment.
Children all around the world, wherever you are, on every corner of the globe, should take care for the environment. Even if you're not so keen, you should do something, a little bit to help the planet. Because in a few years' time, we're not going to enjoy our planet. The air will be polluted, there'll be diseases all around the world, and it won't be safe.
Please save their life and save the birds.
Vegetarianism reduces animal consumption and energy consumption.
Be veggie! Go green! Save the planet! Go veggie!
Go veggie and save the world.
Be veggie! Go green!
Save the planet!
Such lovely, lovely voices from the children. Did you see their beautiful faces? How can we not respect them and protect them?
I absolutely loved them. Their voices really touched my heart.
To respond to the sincere wishes of the children, highly distinguished experts from around the world are presenting their valuable messages for us today, some in person, some via video. This is a very rare chance to hear the best of the best experts who are speaking for us, for our children, and the planet.
First is Mr. Jof Od Roy, the manager of the Climate and Global Sustainability Unit for the Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency, who has done extensive research on the relationship between climate change and dietary change.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Joop Oudeloijs. I'm a researcher at the Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency. It's a pity I can't be here at this very beautiful island, so I'll have to make my contribution by screen. Probably the most difficult issues the world is facing today are climate change and the loss of nature and biodiversity. For 10 to 15 years, the world is concerned and seriously tries to deal with climate change. The focus is strongly directed towards energy use and fossil fuels. And climate change mitigation policies tend to focus on the energy sector. On the other hand, livestock sector receives surprisingly little attention. And I think that's an issue we have to discuss today. The livestock sector accounts for about 18% of greenhouse gas emissions. That is substantial. The livestock sector accounts for about 80% of total anthropogenic land use, and that is more than substantial. And from a dietary perspective, new insights in the adverse effects, the health effects of beef and pork have also led to a revision of consumption recommendations. And I think that's an important issue we have to discuss today. Recently, we explored the potential impact of dietary changes on achieving ambitious climate stabilization levels. And for the first time we made an integrated analysis of all the different elements that are related to eating meat. And that is substitutes for meat, climate change, the possible effects on land use, health and costs. And we know that if we go on a business as usual scenario, livestock would double in the next 40 years and greenhouse gas emissions would go up by about 80%. Well, we found out that a food transition on a global scale, eating less meat, and or even a complete switch to plant-based protein food can have dramatic effects on land use. Up to 2,700 million hectares of pasture and 100 million hectares of cropland can be abandoned, resulting in a large carbon uptake of land instead of being a source of emissions. Additionally, methane, nitrous oxide, that are potentially harmful greenhouse gases, could be reduced substantially. A global transition to a low meat diet, as recommended for health reasons, would reduce mitigation costs by about 50%. In terms of climate change, we would like to keep the global temperature below 2 degrees change, and that would result in a target maximum level of about 450 ppm CO2. The mitigation cost in reaching climate targets could go up to 1 to 2% of global GDP, and that's about $2 trillion a year. A scenario with no meat consumption at all would halve these costs. If we would go to a scenario with no meat at all and also no dairy products, the amount of costs would not even go down with 50%, but at a rate of 70 to 80%, and that's substantial. Dietary changes could therefore not only create substantial benefits for human health and land use, but also play a role in reducing future climate change policies at a lower cost. There are many opportunities in changing a diet from meat to vegetable-based products. In our analysis, we assumed soybeans and pulses to be the main substitutes for meat and dairy products. And we included all the effects of changing land use to these type of products. So we think that is an inclusive study which proves that the effects are scientifically sound. This change in diet could happen between 2010 and 2030, and then the situation would stabilize. The change in land use has a main effect that land use is no longer a source of emissions, but could even become a sink of emissions. The change would result in a net contribution of 1 gigaton of carbon to the atmosphere and change the whole situation into a 1 to 2 gigaton absorption of carbon by way of changing the land use. There is room for regrowth of forests in areas that are now being used by cows and sheep for grazing, for eating grass. The biggest effects are for sure obtained by reducing the amount of ruminants, that is cows or sheep. They have a less efficient digestion, resulting in large amounts of methane emissions. I think, in summary, that science says that there is convincing evidence that changing diet would really benefit climate and would really benefit our preservation of natural habitats. A change is noticeable in behavior of consumers and in supermarkets. There is a growing diversity in terms of vegetarian products, substitutes for meat that can be chosen by consumers. So I think one of the elements of change will be that consumers make their own choices and choose vegetarian products and eat less meat. In summary, from what we know now, changing a diet to less or no meat is one of the lowest cost measures to help the climate change targets. It's good for health, in summary, and it leaves more room for nature and biodiversity. Thank you for your attention.
Wow, isn't that incredible? World governments will save 80% of the cost to stop global warming if the world becomes vegan. It's clear that the food on our table has a tremendous impact on global warming. So our first step to halt climate change should begin with the meals at home and at school.
And yes, speaking of school meals, did you know that Jeju was actually the very first in South Korea to provide environmentally friendly school meals? And by doing this, they really set an example for the rest of the country.
That is amazing. What a noble province this is.
And it was all made possible thanks to the strong grassroots movements and unified efforts of the NGOs in Jeju. And leading the movement is Mr. Lee Yong-jung, the policy chairperson of the Jeju Coalition for Children's Health. This much respected teacher has devoted much of his life to improving children's health. Please join us in welcoming Mr. Lee Yong-jung.
아이들의 건강을 소중하게 여기는 교사 이용중이라고 합니다. 오늘 이렇게 스프랩마스터 텔레비전으로 전 세계 여러분과 만나게 됨을 진심으로 영광스럽게 생각합니다. 저는 지구촌의 3대 과제를 지구온난화, 자원의 고갈, 아이들 건강 악화라고 생각합니다. 그리고 이것들은 하나로 연결된 통합된 의제라고 생각합니다. 이러한 문제들을 해결하려면 자발적 가난에 기초한 자연을 존중하는 삶과 환경기술의 지속적 발전, 그리고 양육과 교육의 패러다임의 전환이 있어야 하고 전 인류의 생활 정치적 연대가 필요하다고 봅니다. 건강과 관련한 8가지 요소들을 그림으로 표시해 보았습니다. 이것들은 서로 연결되어 영향을 끼치고 있는 것들입니다. 그러나 생활 패러다임의 변화로 아이들의 건강이 심각하게 악화되고 있습니다. 먹을거리가 몸을 만들고 몸이 마음을 만든다는 것은 보편적 진리입니다. 그럼에도 불구하고 먹을거리에 대해서 지나치게 우리는 소홀하게 대하고 있습니다. 아이들이 정상 발육과 건강한 삶을 위해 적정한 운동량을 확보하는 것은 선택의 문제가 아닙니다. 그리고 다음 세대를 위해서 당장 결단을 내려야 합니다. 하체 근육과 인체 오염이 어우러져서 발생하고 있는 체온 저하 현상이 광범위하게 나타나고 있습니다. 즉 우리 아이들이 만성 습관성 질병을 잉태한 채 자라나고 있다는 다른 증거이기도 합니다. 이런 질병들은 기본적으로 생활 습관성 질병입니다. 척추증만증을 예로 들겠습니다. 이 질병은 골밀도 저하와 만성적인 불안정한 자세가 주요 요인입니다. 골밀도 저하는 햇볕의 부족과 미네랄을 비롯한 미량 영양소 부족 때문에 발생하는 일입니다. 이 질병 중 고치기가 가장 쉬운 질병이 아토피이고 아이들이 인생을 가장 불행하게 만들 가능성이 있는 질병은 ADHD입니다. 그리고 치료가 가장 어려운 질병은 성장기 비만입니다. 아이들의 건강을 이대로 방치하면 2030년에 이런 일들이 벌어질 것입니다. 충동성 범죄는 몸이 건강하지 않기 때문에 발생하는 게 대부분입니다. 즉 대재앙을 잉태한 채 기다리는 시한폭탄과 똑같은 일입니다. 아이들의 기본 건강을 위해 우리는 당장 결단을 내려야 합니다. 건강한 삶을 위해서는 어린 시절이 중요하고 그 시기에 많은 노력이 있어야 한다는 것입니다. 만성 생활습관성 환자를 줄이려면 어린 시기에 적절한 대책이 강구하는 것이 적은 비용으로 큰 효과를 낼 수 있습니다. 건강한 잉태, 태교, 출산, 수유 문화와 육아를 중요시하게 생각하고 각종 정책이 만들어져야 한다는 것입니다. 어린 시절 생활습관 형성과 교정을 위한 비용을 국가가 우선적으로 집행해야 하는데 건강한 각종 만성 습관성 질병의 치유는 먹을거리와 운동과 마음 다스리기가 명의입니다. 더 중요한 것은 올바른 생활 습관을 가지면 이런 질병이 생기지도 거의 않습니다. 먹을거리는 농부와 보호자들이 중요합니다. 생활 습관은 부모와 교사의 역할이 중요합니다. 아이들 건강을 위해 명의는 부모와 교사와 농부가 명의로 자리매김하면 우리 문제는 대부분 해결되리라 저는 확신합니다. 아이들 건강 문제는 사회 패러다임의 변화와 생활 문화의 총체적 반영입니다. 지속 가능과 신지식 기반 사회를 대비하기 위해서도 새로운 패러다임이 요구되고 있는 것입니다. 먹을거리 패러다임이란 농업, 식품산업, 식생활 전반적으로 건강 중심으로 맞춰 나가자는 것입니다. 식체덕지로 교육 목표를 바꾸자는 것 또한 아이들이 몸과 마음과 영성이 건강을 중심으로 보통교육을 설계하자는 취지입니다. 사전 예방의 원칙은 더 이상 언급할 필요가 없을 것 같습니다. 건강생태 제주발전 전략은 교육, 농업, 관광, 자연치유 메카, 생활혁신 5가지로 나누어 제안하고 있습니다. 제주가 아이들이 건강하게 자라나는 곳으로 자리매김하면 제주의 재반 문제는 자연스럽게 해결되리라 확신합니다. 특별자치란 제도를 활용, 아이들이 특별히 건강하게 자라나는 제주를 만들면, 그런 제주를 우리가 꿈꾸고 실행을 하면 가능한 일이라고 생각합니다. 건강생태 제주발전 전략은 돈이 많이 들거나 과학적 지식이 많이 필요한 사항이 아닙니다. 도민사회 합의가 이루어지면 그리 어려운 문제는 아닙니다. 교육계, 농업계, 종교계가 앞장을 서고 시민사회 진영이 합의를 하고 재정당과 도의회가 정책적 대안들을 만들어내고 자치단체가 종합적인 관점에서 일을 추진하면 그것은 결코 어려운 일이 아닙니다. 우리 앞을 가로막고 있는 것은 관행에 젖어 있는 생활문화와 행정풍토이고 정치문화일 뿐입니다. 자연의 세계에서 새끼를 해치는 어미는 없습니다. 그런데 만물의 영장이라는 인간이 아이들을 병들게 자라도록 방치하고 있습니다. 이는 정말 부끄러운 일이고 명백한 집단적 범죄 행위에 불과하다고 저는 봅니다. 아이들이 건강한 제주는 선택의 문제가 아닙니다. 다음 세대를 위한 우리 모두의 최소한의 책무라고 생각합니다. 우리 모두가 아이들이 건강한 제주를 위해서 같이 꿈꾸길 부탁드리겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lee Young-jun. I'm very touched by your lifelong dedication to children's health. Now, Callie, let's talk about a very timely issue.
Something like swine flu?
Yes, swine flu, or the novel H1N1 virus, which is one of the biggest threats facing humankind today. But what is the root cause of this disease? Let's find out from Dr. Michael Greger, the Director of Public Health and Animal Agriculture at the Humane Society of the United States. He is a medical doctor and a renowned expert on the many types of diseases originating from factory-farmed animals, including swine flu, bird flu, and mad cow disease.
And Dr. Greger has prepared this special lecture for this conference via video. So let's take a look.
According to the World Health Organization, 2 billion people may become infected with swine flu, and our children may be at the highest risk. Normally, 90% of flu deaths are in the elderly, 65 years and older. But with swine flu, children and young adults ages 5 through 14 are more than 10 times more likely to become infected. That means 15,000 Korean children may die. Where did this virus come from? Well, the genetic fingerprint of this virus was published this summer, and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and laboratories from around the world have confirmed that the main ancestor of the current pandemic virus was the triple hybrid mutant pig-bird-human virus that emerged and spread throughout industrialized farms in the United States 10 years ago. This first hybrid mutant was found on an industrial farm in North Carolina in August of 1998 that confined thousands of pregnant pigs in metal crates so small they couldn't turn around. Thanks to long-distance live animal transport, the virus then spread throughout North America, and thanks to the export of pigs to Asia, it reached Korea by 2005. This is not the first disease to emerge from factory farms. And unless we start giving these animals more breathing room, it may not be the last. For example, China. 2005, the world's largest producer of pork suffered an unprecedented outbreak of an emerging pig pathogen called Strep suis, which caused meningitis and deafness in people handling infected pork products. Hundreds of people infected with the deadliest strain on record. Why? Well, the World Health Organization blames in part these intensive confinement conditions. The U.S. Department of Agriculture elaborates, all Strep suis seems to start out harmless, asymptomatic as normal flora, but then stress due to inadequate housing, ventilation, overcrowding allows the bug to go invasive, causing infections of the brain, blood, lungs, heart, and death. Starts out harmless, turns deadly. That's what these kind of conditions may be able to do. This is not arguably how animals were meant to live. July 2009, just a few months ago, a strain of Ebola was reported on a factory farm in the Philippines, confining 6,000 pigs. It was Ebola restin, the same strain featured in the book The Hot Zone. Airborne Ebola, but doesn't seem to be able to infect people, but with enough time to mutate in pigs, who knows? So they drove them into these pits and then burned them alive. We feed antibiotics by the truckload to farmed animals. This is the total amount of antibiotics used for all of human medicine every year here in the States. Now contrast that with the amount that's just fed to farm animals just to promote growth and prevent disease in such a stressful, unhygienic, crowded environment. Millions of pounds a year. And now we as physicians are faced with these multi-drug resistant, antibiotic resistant bacteria and are running out of good treatment options, particularly in pediatric populations. As Britain's chief medical officer put it in his 2009 annual report, every inappropriate use of antibiotics in agriculture is a potential death warrant for a future patient. Industrial animal farms have been shown to be breeding grounds for disease for at least 10 reasons. For example, because of the sheer numbers of animals, because of the overcrowding. It's like having 5,000 people in an elevator and someone sneezes. Because of the stress crippling their immune systems. The operation in Newton Grove, North Carolina, where the ancestor of the current pandemic virus was first detected, was a breeding facility in which thousands of pregnant sows were confined in gestation crates, also known as sow stalls. These are veal crate-like barren metal cages about 2 feet wide. These highly intelligent social animals essentially kept in a box. Week after week, month after month, for nearly their entire lives, they can develop crippling joint deformities, lameness. Not only can these pregnant pigs not turn around, they can barely move for most of their lives. Because of the lack of fresh air, the dankness helps keep the virus alive in these kind of facilities. Because there may be no sunlight. The UV rays in sunlight are actually quite effective in destroying the influenza virus. 30 minutes of direct sunlight utterly deactivates the influenza virus, but it can last for days in the shade and weeks in moist manure. And indeed, because of the decomposing fecal waste, releasing ammonia, burning the respiratory tracts of these animals, predisposing them to infection in the first place. Put these and all these other factors together, and what you have is really this kind of perfect storm environment for the emergence and spread of new so-called super strains of influenza. The public health community has been warning about the dangers of industrialized animal agriculture for years. In 2003, the American Public Health Association, the largest Organization of Public Health Professionals in the world called for a moratorium on industrialized animal farming. In 2005, the United Nations called on all governments, local authorities, international agencies, told them they needed to take a greatly increased role in combating the role of factory farming, which combined with these live bird markets provide what they call ideal conditions for the virus to spread and mutate into a more dangerous form. In 2008, the Pew Commission on Industrial Farm Animal Production, which included a former U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, concluded that these so-called factory farms present unacceptable public health risks. The former director of the commission calls these industrial farms super incubators for viruses. They're a public health menace that must be stopped. Only a few thousand people have died so far of swine flu, though, although one could never really call anything that's killed hundreds of children mild exactly, but this H1N1 virus hasn't been much worse than the regular seasonal flu so far, but this may just be the first wave. The 1918 flu pandemic was relatively mild first as well. Though we're not exactly sure what happened in 1918 compared to what was to come later, this first initial wave in the summer of 1918 hardly registered a blip, but it came back in the fall to kill tens of millions of people. In Korea in 1918, according to the Japanese colonial government at the time, as many as 8 million Koreans died the last time an animal flu virus jumped species into human beings. Now, the worst case scenario estimate would be if the swine flu were to combine with the H5N1 bird flu, both of which have been found in pigs. So if a single pig in parts of Asia or Africa where the H5N1 bird flu virus has become endemic, if that pig becomes co-infected with both swine flu and the new bird flu, the concern is that it could theoretically produce a virus with the human transmissibility of the swine flu, but the human lethality of the bird flu. In 1918, the mortality rate of the pandemic was less than 5%. This estimate here on the right, potentially tens of millions of people dead in the next pandemic, is based on this same 2 to 3% mortality rate, what the U.S. Centers for Disease Control calls a Category 5 pandemic, around 2% mortality, around 2 million Americans dead. So that's 2%. But H5N1 has so far killed over half of its known human victims. Don't even seem to get a coin toss as to whether or not one lives through this disease. Up to 10 million Koreans come down with the flu every year. What if it suddenly turned deadly? That's what keeps everyone up at night. The possibility, however slight, that a virus like H5N1 could trigger a pandemic. That would be like combining one of our most contagious known diseases, influenza, with one of the deadliest, like crossing a disease like Ebola with the common cold. All animals deserve humane treatment. How we treat animals can have global public health implications, and these newly emerging chicken and pig flu viruses are but one example. We deny them a modicum of mercy to both their detriment and potentially to ours as well. We need to end the long-distance live animal transport of farm animals, which can spread diseases around the world. We need to follow the Pew Commission's recommendations to abolish these extreme confinement practices like crates for pregnant pigs, as they're already doing in Europe and starting to here in the States. And ultimately, we need to follow the advice of the public health professionals and declare no more factory farms. Let me end with a quote from the World Health Organization. The bottom line is humans have to think about how they raise their animals, how they farm them, how they market them. Basically, the whole relationship between the animal kingdom and the human kingdom is coming under stress. In this age of emerging diseases, we now have billions of feathered and curly-tailed test tubes for viruses to incubate and mutate within billions more spins at pandemic roulette. Along with human culpability, though, comes hope. If changes in human behavior can cause new plagues, well, then changes in human behavior may prevent them in the future.
Thank you so much for your enlightening lecture, Dr. Greger. It showed us the clear link between factory farming and diseases such as swine flu.
So, it's beginning to look like the vegan way of life is better, not only for climate change, but for preventing new diseases.
Yes, indeed, an organic vegan diet is the true solution for a sustainable planet.
집에 가서 우리 또 애 엄마하고 같이 머리 맞대서 우리 가족의 건강을 좀 더 좀 심히 있게 논의를 해야 될 것 같다고 생각이 듭니다. 이제 여기서 교육을 듣고 나니까 여러 선생님들 말씀을 듣고 나니까 아 이건 진짜 내가 설서몸서 실천을 해야 되겠구나. 육식보다는 채식 위주로 해서 식단을 짜고 그렇게 먹는 게 좋지 않은가라고 해서 저도 주위 분들에게 좀 권하고 싶습니다.
이걸 통해서요, 채식을 하면요, 더 건강해지고 더 오래 살 수 있다는 걸 알았어요. 많이 먹어야 될 것 같아요, 채식. 네.
지구 온난화, 그 다음에 기후변화, 아이들이 건강, 이런 것들은 앞으로 우리 인류가 같이 고민해서 나가는 그러한 연구가 상당히 필요한 것 같습니다. 많은 정치인들과 또 학교, 또 학교를 운영하는 그러한 교육청, 또 시민들 서로가 같은 의식을 갖고 끌어안아야 이 문제를 해결할 수 있다고 생각합니다. 또 정치인들이 이런 문제를 끌어안는 깊은 그런 정책의 배려가 필요합니다. 그래야 신문지상에도 보더라도요, 이러한 문제를 체계 있게 밀도 있게 다루고 있지 않다고 이런 기사를 많이 읽을 수가 있습니다. 저는 지금 채식 위주의 그 식단을 그려가고 있습니다. 그래서 몸이 아주 가볍고 또 그런 것을 실천해 보니까 아주 좋은 것을 발견했습니다. 주위 분들한테도 우리 가족들한테도 될 수 있는 대로 이러한 방향으로 우리가 한번 해보자.
지구를 사랑하는 시청자 여러분, 오늘 지혜의 말씀을 시청해 주셔서 감사합니다. 화요일에 계속될 아이 건강과 지속가능 지구촌 제주 국제 컨퍼런스 3부도 계속 시청해 주시길 바랍니다. 이제 스프림 마스터 텔레비전에서 주목할 뉴스들이 예술과 영성이 방영됩니다. 사랑과 친절로 가득한 행복한 한 주가 되시길 기원합니다.
Thank you, our loving viewers, for your company for today's episode of Words of Wisdom. Join us again on Tuesday for part 3 of Children's Health and Sustainable Planet Jeju International Conference. And now, please stay tuned to Spring Master Television for a journey through aesthetic realms, coming up next, right after Noteworthy News. We wish you a happy week full of loving kindness.
For more details, please visit www.suprememastertv.com/WOW.